Compassion fatigue is really extends beyond being empathetic with someone. This is something that can affect anyone who works with people, and it's especially important for people who work in very trauma-filled situations, like in the criminal justice system, to be aware of the fact that working with people with problems can become emotionally exhausting. Um, Compassion fatigue takes some time to develop. It's not something that's going to come on in the first 2 weeks where someone is on a job. It really extends over a longer period of time where it just becomes a weariness of listening to and responding to and helping people with their problems. Compassion resilience is a really important, relatively new concept that is being examined. Compassion resilience is the counterbalance to compassion fatigue. For people who do work with people with complex problems, it can be very rewarding and very professionally and personally satisfying to see people make accomplishments and reach goals in their recovery journey. So that positive response that you feel both as a team and as an individual would be considered compassion resilience and can help to outweigh the effects of compassion fatigue with working with a very complex population. The difference between compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma is that vicarious trauma resembles primary trauma. What I mean by that is that the symptoms of vicarious trauma are often the same symptoms that people experience when they have experienced a primary trauma, such as hypervigilance, being very jumpy, having a lot of difficulty sleeping, having difficulty concentrating. Compassion fatigue, on the other hand, is more of an emotional exhaustion or a fatigue in working with people with complex problems, but it doesn't include developing symptoms of trauma that vicarious trauma does. Burnout is another term that you frequently hear people talk about, especially in organizations that work with people. But burnout is something that develops over a long period of time. Similar to compassion fatigue, it is a form of emotional exhaustion, but it doesn't necessarily arise from the interactions with the people, the clients that people actually work with. It can result from work overload, too little time to do too much. It can result from work conflict among coworkers and your supervisors. And burnout really takes a while to develop, whereas compassion fatigue can develop in a relatively short period of time. Burnout takes a while, and it's when people really eventually just become ineffective in the job that they're doing. I think that one of the major difficulties that organizations have when working with people with complex trauma histories, especially those in the justice system, is they don't care for themselves very well. And people who are trained in behavioral health, such as social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, and others, part of their training and education is to practice self-care. Whether they do or not is a different issue, but they're at least aware of the fact that when you work with people, you need to take care of yourself also so that you can help them effectively. In the criminal justice system, there's no similar kind of process in the education of going to law school or getting your degree in criminal justice and becoming a probation officer. Basically, the attitude in many criminal justice agencies is just to suck it up and to just move on to the next case. And we're realizing that that is not a very effective way to keep your workforce well. It's just as important for people who are justice professionals to practice self-care around the issues of compassion fatigue and burnout and vicarious trauma as it is the behavioral health professionals. It can affect anybody in the criminal justice system. It can affect people who sit on juries. It can affect the prosecutors, defense attorneys, probation officers, correctional officers, and judges. Everyone who works with people in that environment, especially as they get to know defendants and participants' stories more, they can experience the same kinds of difficulties that burnout and compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. The kinds of areas to really be on the lookout for in yourself and in coworkers would be probably the most obvious first step would be if someone's work product begins to slip. If they've previously been a very conscientious coworker or person who you supervise and they no longer are, that may be a red flag. Also taking into consideration their health, their general medical health. People who begin to take a lot of sick leave, are tardy a lot, have a lot of illness also might be underlying signs of vicarious trauma or compassion fatigue. You also can look at mental health issues, and included in that substance use. If, again, you see an increase or a change in the kinds of ways in which people deal with stress, maybe they become more angry, more irritable, become more frustrated, detached, no longer are participating in activities in the workplace that they typically have. Those would be all signs that you should look for and be concerned about in your coworkers and also in yourself as you become more aware of the importance of self-care working with this population. There are both individual level and organizational level ways of addressing self-care and wellness. There are lots and lots of resources available through employee assistance programs. And if they don't have specific workplace wellness programs around dealing with stress, dealing with complex trauma, ask them to develop a program and tell them that your organization needs that, because that organization can't simply be the only one who they serve that need that input. Also, you can practice self-care in that you can seek out different forms of stress relieving exercises, practicing mindfulness, meditation, yoga. All of these have been shown to reduce stress on an individual level. And obviously, if people find that those interventions, those practices aren't helpful, to seek professional care through a psychologist, psychiatrist, or social worker who specializes in dealing with traumatic stress, dealing with complex issues like this.